And we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and all creatures great and small. We are back for Religion Zero, number 43. Yeah, I'm even surprised we've made it this far. But yeah, for some reason, we have nothing better to do on a Sunday. I know for a lot of these guys, it's early morning. For those in the UK, good afternoon. We are in for a treat today as we have a fantastic guest lined up. He is the editor of Punch Riot Magazine, former pastor of a Southern Baptist denomination. He's going to be sharing a lot of the insights of what goes on behind the scenes, as we say, he's seen Oz with no clothes. But before we get into it, we have the full panel. We got CONK and my friend AMOS. How are you guys doing? How was your week? Any good insights for our listeners? CONK, over to you, man. How's the Airbnb business going?
Oh, it's going good. But I mean, you said I was supposed to have good insights. I don't know if I could appease that, but man, I got some insights. Might sound like a deranged homeless man that didn't take his meds, but I got insights.
How is that different from any pastor minister out there leading any congregation? So you're in good company.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, pretty soon we'll start my monologue about how birds aren't real. But first, we'll start with the small stuff. Yeah, the Airbnb business is going good. I got people upstairs right now, seem like a normal, wholesome family. They brought a pretty noisy, loud dog. You can hear it scratching and jumping around everywhere. But other than that, this is way better than my last 3 or 4. So, bueno.
You allow pets in your Airbnb?
Yeah, dude. I got a giant 1-acre fenced yard. It's awesome.
Oh, okay.
I got a fire pit, garden bed. I'm setting up a greenhouse once it gets warm. It's awesome.
So your place for 4th of July then is what you're saying, right?
Oh yeah. The house was a dump, and I spent like 4 months fixing it before I actually started renting it out. I bought it in August, started the Airbnb in January, and that whole time was just trying to till that giant acre of like overgrown woods, trying to make that normal, trying to do the bare minimum in the house just to get people in and renting it, you know. But yeah, that's the real selling point, is a giant backyard with a pit, you know, gardens, all of that kind of stuff. And then I have a giant like 1,000 square foot sunroom, you know, that's like that halfway in between indoors, outdoors. And I've got like conference tables, chairs, so people use it for like birthday events and stuff like that. It holds like 20 people in the sunroom alone. So it's pretty sick. Yeah, it's a party house.
Right, 4th of July at your place. I'll fly over, bro, and we'll make something of it.
Oh yeah, let's do it. America.
Amos, man, good morning. How are you in old Minnesota? You digging yourself out of the snow yet, or you actually reached spring?
Finally,
like real spring or fake
spring now. I have declared it. There will be no winter until December.
That's Minnesota, bro. That's never gonna happen.
Yeah. No, we finally got warm weather. I went to go buy some new tennis shoes for the weather, because I've been in pretty much in boots this whole time. Kind of just waiting. All right, when's the last snow? And then I got regular shoes for my job, so I can actually walk around like normal, not hauling around boots. But otherwise, yeah, everything's going well over here. That's really it. It's just the weather.
Well, Minnesota, it is all about the weather. When it's not snowing, that is reason to celebrate. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, everything here is kind of moving towards opening back up as the summer comes around. I had a nice little walk at the Mall of America yesterday.
Nice.
It was packed.
Oh, really?
It's funny. They had everyone wearing masks. But there was no social distancing.
Shoulder to shoulder.
People were like touching shoulders in some parts.
Really?
And they've got signs up everywhere. You know, this is how you wear a mask. Try to be careful and all this stuff. They got all these ways they're trying to prevent the spread. But I'm like, yeah, you're not preventing any spread if any spread happens.
At least it's back open. Just very quickly.
I mean, it was a Saturday at the biggest mall in the country. And it was packed.
That's good though.
They're not controlling for anything. They're just like, it's all just a facade at this point.
But man, you gotta spend those stimmies, right?
Yeah. That's probably why. That's a big part.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
not buying Bitcoin. Come on, normies.
Hold that GameStop, man. Diamond hands all the way to the moon.
Jeez.
Yeah, just very quickly for myself, you guys, I'm in Wales in the United Kingdom. We are officially in spring. It is pretty warm out. Yeah, it's been pretty quiet. We are actually kind of creeping out of the lockdown. I think in a couple days, we're allowed to do outdoor gatherings like barbecues and other things like that. It is so overdue at this point. I'm totally frustrated with this stuff. I can't get to the gym. The bands that I have all busted because, you know, those things are fucking useless. So yeah, if it weren't for the podcasting and Religion Zero and other things, I'd probably have lost my mind, you know, weeks ago. So I totally get it. We just had a massive protest in London and in Wales for the lockdown yesterday. I was supposed to go out, but I got, you know, rather distracted by a particularly feisty Welsh girl that decided to stop in and say hi and yeah, finished off a bottle of Prosecco. And anyway, if you want to hear that story, you got to log into the Raw Takes on the 10K Run podcast and I'll share those details. But yeah, gentlemen, we have a fantastic guest, our friend Nick August. Thank you so much for joining us today, my friend. Would you mind just introducing yourself and maybe share a little bit about how your week has been?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. The week's been good. I'm in the southern U.S. It's been warming up. Sun's out. Sap's rising, as they say. So it's been nice.
Y'all don't get very cold out where you're at. Is that right to say?
Yeah, I'm in South Alabama. So
nice.
We'll get a few months of what we call cold, but it's not what most other people would consider cold. So
yeah, it's like 50s, right? It's like
well, yeah, we'll have a few weeks where it'll get down in the 20s or teens occasionally, but that's usually as far as we go. So it's kind of nice.
Oh, nice.
Y'all weren't affected by the big Texas freeze that time when Texas actually experienced some snow. You didn't have anything to do with that.
No, that moved northeast pretty quickly. So I think it got a little bit cold in the northern part of Alabama, but nothing like what they got now.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Nick, I mean, you know, we're so glad to have you on the show. We definitely wanted to hear a bit of your story. Of course, we want to, you know, hear your progression, the story about how you went through ministry, seminary, into the ministry. And am I right in saying you're not really in it at the moment? Is that right?
Yes, that would be an understatement, but yeah.
Well, please share a little bit of your story.
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, mainly I went to college as a religion and philosophy major and as a ministerial student. Intending to go into the full-time ministry as a Southern Baptist. And I went to a Southern Baptist college and got my bachelor's in religion there. And I had a scholarship to seminary, but I never quite made it to seminary. That was kind of you know, it was time to shift up into a higher gear, and it was also a time where I was realizing that I probably needed to, you know, I needed to put my Lambo on a different road, so to speak. So I kind of shifted gears right there and never quite made it to seminary.
Fair enough. I mean, so were you raised in a faith household? Is that kind of where, or did you have a encounter of any kind? How did you get on that path?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually born into a Catholic family. And, but, you know, by the time I was 6 or 7, we were not actively going to church or anything, not going to mass, not really practicing that. So I grew up mainly, you know, with no kind of religion at all in the house, really. And it was actually when I was in high school, and I was always kind of a weird kid. You know, I read a lot of books, go figure. I was a serious athlete in high school, but I was also kind of a serious nerd at the same time.
Amen.
And I read a lot of books, and I was always very contemplative, I guess. And and things would bug me. I'd get these questions they kind of start out as an itch, and then you just start scratching it until you're bloody and raw and just give up. That's kind of the way I approached a lot of those sorts of things. And yeah, so I got, when I was in high school, Fellowship of Christian Athletes is a thing over here. I don't know if it is anywhere else, but we had a fairly active FCA chapter, and that's where I really got into the whole religion thing. I became a Christian, and shortly thereafter, it was I guess late in my junior, early in my senior year of high school, that one day I decided, I'm, God's calling me into the ministry, and so that's where I'm headed, and that's what I did.
Nice.
At least as far as college went.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite of most people who go to college. I drank and partied a lot in high school, and then in college I was kind of a white knight or a monk. I didn't give up girls, but I did give up drinking and all that and partying and stuff. So my college years were actually very different from, I think, what most people's are.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I was going to say here, Fellowship of Christian Athletes is pretty big in Missouri too. My uncle worked at like their Kansas City HQ for a couple of years, and we get a bunch of free memorabilia and stuff like that, some swag.
Yeah.
So we always had some random like FCA shirts and crap like that we just got for free out of the back bin and crap like that. So yeah. So here, it's either FCA or it's Campus Crusade for the non-athletic.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we had a thing called Young Life too, which I don't know if that's part of Campus Crusade or not, but Young Life was the same kind of thing.
Yeah. I worked at a Salvation Army in St. Louis, and they were huge into Young Life and doing all that. And it's kind of like the high school trying to be cool thing. Yeah, that's how it was there. Yeah.
Well, it was kind of, it was funny because when FCA started getting kind of big. I played football in high school, and so it got kind of big with the football team in particular. And it was funny because I had these friends, because the FCA dude would come every week, and we would have we'd have a devotional, we'd have a meeting, and so the dude from FCA would be talking about kind of selling all of the cool, trips, like, they have this FCA trip to Colorado where you go skiing and then, sit around the fire and talk about Jesus. And, he was really selling the ski trip more than he was selling Jesus, but, whatever. And it was funny though, because all my friends they were like, man, this FCA is great. We can go skiing. We can go, we can go to the beach. There was all this stuff that they could do. And I was excited about it because there was this, my mind was opening up to this whole world of religion, theology, mystery stuff that from a I think both an existential and an intellectual standpoint, I was really hungry for at the time, for whatever reason. And so that's what got me excited about it. I didn't really care about the trips. And so it was kind of funny because that was where I started kind of thinking that I was special.
Yeah, that kind of leads into the question I wanted to ask is like, what even got you there? So you said you grew up non-religious, and then through the FCA and all of those programs, you started caring about Christianity enough to actually make that your major in college, right? So like, what was specifically the appeal? Was it like the gospel story, or was it just the scholarly aspect of it, or what really drew you into actually want to pursue it?
Well, I mean, that's interesting. And I can tell you, I can first tell you what that was like from, Nick, the 17-year-old, but then looking back, I have a totally different take on it. Right. Cause now I'm 54. So, there's a difference, there's a difference in perspective there. As a 17-year-old, it's funny because I was graduating high school and I was kind of getting, and this really didn't happen until graduation was approaching. It was about a year away, and I had to start thinking about, what my life was going to be, at least for the next, couple of years. And I had kind of, hit, call it an existential crisis, if you can have that as a 17-year-old. But, I was already getting burned out on life. I'd seen, I'd gone through, my parents had gotten divorced when I was in my early teens. And so I'd seen, I'd gone through all of that, upheaval in the family. And like I said, I partied a lot in high school and got kind of burned out on that. And I was looking at life and I was like, man, is this it? This seems kind of lame. This seems like a raw deal. This isn't all the cool stuff that I thought life was like when I was, 13 and reading adventure novels and stuff like that. So I was really kind of lost in the usual sense that you would use that in church, and I was looking for direction. I was looking for, something deeper, and that just sort of happened to come along at that time. And it really appealed to me because I remember I had this conversation with my mom a couple of weeks earlier, and she was really getting pissed off at me because I was 17. I was like, look, you guys obviously can't run your life. I think I can run my life better than you guys ran yours. And, better than any advice you can give me, the typical, 17-year-old arrogance. And she, I didn't care about school. I really didn't care about much. And, she and I had that conversation, and I just told her, I said, look, I'm not, I don't really see any reason to change, this attitude. And just a few weeks later, I was at an FCA meeting, and, the FCA guy was, giving this devotional about following Christ and accepting Christ as your Savior. And it was one of those moments where everything lined up and it just made sense to me. And I was like, yeah, this is what I need next. Or this is what I need now. And it, kind of went from there.
Sick.
I mean, that is, even for myself, I think I was probably around 18 when I had my first encounter with spirituality. Before that, I was kind of like the militant atheist. So it was quite a change. So I could relate to a bit of that. And how did your family take it when you decided to go down this path, saying that, they weren't really practicing, and suddenly you kind of took it on with some fervor? What was their response?
They didn't really know what to do with me at that point. It was like, and it was great, right? Because it was, I looking back, and I didn't see this at all then, but it was like the ultimate way to rebel against your parents.
That's true.
Because, my dad was very conservative, but he was not religious, but he was not antagonistic toward religion. But this made me even more conservative than him. So that kind of, worried him a little bit. And then my mom and my stepdad were both they weren't atheists or anything like that, but they definitely were not, they definitely did not see, me becoming a Southern Baptist. That was a big curveball for them. So that was kind of fun too, really, when I look back at it. I didn't think about it at the time, but I definitely got a perverse pleasure out of how much that bothered them.
Yeah, there is something to it in kind of disappointing your parents with something like that. It's kind of twisted.
Well, and it's funny because my mom and my stepdad, who I lived with most of the time, they were very tolerant of, yeah, you're going to drink. Yeah, you're going to have sex. Yeah, you're going to do all this stuff. And they were like, it's cool, man. Just don't drink and drive. Don't get anybody pregnant. Here's some condoms. They gave me condoms and stuff like that, which was all weird. Weird for me, even before the conversion experience. But yeah, it was kind of fun, because this was like serious rebellion against everything. And I kind of wish I would have had the mindset and the vocabulary to openly talk with them more about it at the time, but I didn't. It was just like, yeah, I'm a Christian, now piss off, leave me alone, and let me do my thing.
Yeah, that is kind of common for like the teenage rebellion side. You usually just do the opposite spirituality of your parents. And so normally that means, oh, you rebel against Christianity, but this way it was the opposite, right?
Yeah, and it was kind of, despite what, because my thinking on all of that has evolved and progressed. Well, you could say progressed. Maybe it hasn't. It's definitely changed and evolved a lot over the years. But if you're going to be a teenager and going into college, and you're going to rebel against your parents by not drinking and trying not to have sex as much as possible, and trying not to be a party animal, I mean, that, in some ways, in some ways I would look back at college and think, boy, I really wasted some good years. And then very seriously, in other ways, I would look back and say, that given my proclivity for just being a little bit reckless, that also might have saved my life. I don't know. There's no way to know that. And I think that's one of those things that has stuck with me, I think, all these years.
Fantastic. All right, so I mean, let's jump forward a little bit. You've done your degree. You actually did eventually make it into full-time ministry. Is that correct?
It was part-time. Okay. I served as a youth director for a couple of churches. Let's see. Like when I was in college, I was president of our Baptist Student Union, and all the stuff that went along with that. And I worked in inner city soup kitchens. Did a lot of kind of what we used to call like in town missions or local missions, where we go into depressed or impoverished areas and do Bible studies for kids, and all that kind of stuff. So I was involved to that level all through college, and then just a little bit after college before I kind of left.
So I mean, how long would you say that you were kind of doing the ministry work then? And then ultimately, what made you have the decision that you wanted to step away from that?
It was about 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years, yeah.
Most of that in college, a little bit before, and a little bit after, and pretty much all during. And there was, because I was a ministerial student and I was on that track, and because I went to a Southern Baptist college, they had a lot, they had so many programs for kind of easing you into the ministry. And they had this program where the local churches in the area could sign up and send, one of us out there to deliver their sermon on a Sunday morning. And so all the counties surrounding the college where I went, would all have a weekend where they could sign up for that. And we would all meet up at the religion building on Sunday morning and, get directions and everything to wherever we were going. And then, so we would go to the meeting point in these various counties, and representatives or the pastors from those various churches that signed up to have us visit would come and, pick us up, take us back there. We deliver the sermon. They'd, feed us some fried chicken and send us back to campus. And it was kind of a cool thing. I found out, but to sort of as a transition into your second question, that was when I started realizing that this wasn't for me.
So I mean that's kind of where we want to go with the discussion. I think for every person here, we've all had some kind of ministry experience, and we've kind of seen some of the things going on behind the scenes that in many ways has turned a lot of people off. They say that the biggest cause of atheism is Christians, dealing with Christianity and Christians and stuff like that. So, I mean, maybe a couple of the stories of, your time there and a little bit of the despondency that you may have experienced.
Well, for me, I mean, the core of it was more my own intellectual journey, I guess. And if you want to call it a spiritual journey, you could call it that too, I suppose. But, the core of it was just me continuing to question things to the degree that I got to the point where I wasn't at that time rejecting Christianity or anything. I was rejecting the idea that I was called into the ministry and that there was, that made any sense for me anymore at all. And, so that was really the core of it. But the stuff I saw behind the scenes certainly didn't help.
It never does.
Right. And, so the more I got, and it's funny because the churches I worked in while I was in college and most of that experience was actually fine. I didn't have anything that I would consider all that negative, that I saw. But as I graduated college and I started going to a church that was being pastored by a religion professor I had in college, and somebody I got along really well with, and he also was the philosophy professor at the time. So in addition to all the usual stuff, all the whatever theology classes and religion classes he offered, he also taught the philosophy classes. So he got me into reading people like Nietzsche and other philosophers that that appealed to me as a college student. And so I started going to his church, and then and then he got divorced, and it turned, and I found out, this was actually a couple of years later, but I found out that he had fallen in love with the wife of somebody in the congregation, which is,
wow.
That never happens, right? And it was a and it wasn't, it didn't really bother me at the time, because from what I understood, they didn't start having some kind of passionate affair. They just, it broke up both of their marriages, and they ultimately ended up not being together. And so I kind of saw all that, and I was still pretty sour from my parents getting divorced, and I didn't, I never liked divorce, not so much from any kind of religious perspective, but it was just more, I'd experienced what that had done, in my family, and what that had, put us all through. And I just didn't think that was a fair thing to do to your kids, unless there was a really good reason. Right. So that kind of soured me on that. But, and the other part about it was that this professor, I mean, I had babysat his kids for them, a lot. And so I knew their kids, and I was like, man, this is going to be hard on those little guys. And so, so that was like the first small chink in the armor, I guess. And as I got down, and there were also other things that are really even more personal, because as a youth director, it's when you're in a position of leadership, and you're 21 years old, and you're leading a youth group that has a lot of 17-year-old girls in it.
Yeah.
And they've all been raised in a more or less typical evangelical home, and they're even more eager to experience life as we we could say. That's and some of them are just going to, they're just going to throw themselves at you kind of. And that was a temptation that I had never had to deal with before. And so, all right, she's 17, she's almost 18, she's about to graduate high school, but she's in this youth group and I'm the youth director. And that, when you're 18, 18, 19, 20, 21, and you're a, young guy who's horny all the time, that's a big deal. That's a big test. And I never failed that test, but I started to realize that if this is what I could expect going down the road, sooner or later I was going to fail that test too. I didn't have any confidence in myself. And, you could say that's also a lack of faith. Fine. But I just knew that, this is, I barely passed that one, with a D. I'm not going to, if I have to take this test again, I don't think I'm going to make it.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting to push into, if we're talking more about the red pill perspective, right? Like how do you feel in general the church gives advice to dating men and women and things like that? Do you think it even really works?
I think, and here that's a great question because I think the church in general does a horrible job at almost everything.
It's literally just government part 2.
Yeah. I mean, but see, here's the thing. So before I got divorced, we were actually going to a United Methodist church that we went to for several years, in which my ex-wife actually worked at. And there's a whole nother set of stories that goes along with that,
I'm sure.
But, the church itself is kind of this bumbling organization in a lot of ways that likes to see itself one way, but in actuality is, in practice, is walking a very different kind of road, just like individuals. But it also provides, even though I didn't go on any of these trips, our church sponsored mission trips to Haiti, after the
hurricanes and
the hurricanes there.
Yeah.
And, we have, our church was a wealthy church. I live in a small Alabama town, but it's actually a fairly wealthy town. A lot of doctors, a lot of dentists, a lot of professionals. And, there were a lot of, members of that church who were doctors who, flew down, they organized multiple trips, flew down to Haiti on their own dime, spent their own money as much as needed to bring, some basic medical supplies, stay down there a week or two, to help out with just treating people. We're talking eye doctors and dentists and, regular internists, MDs. And as you all know, there are churches and other Christian groups and other religions groups all over the world doing the same thing. So, you can't totally dismiss it, but you also have to be realistic about what it's actually doing. And so there's a lot of good that gets done both, internationally and at home, but then there's also just a lot of, dumbass shit that gets done in the name of churchiosity and stuff too. So it's definitely, I really see it as a double-edged sword. There's some great stuff about it. And then there's also just the dumbest, worst crap you could ever imagine, and you have to accept both of that. And that's another reason why I'm not there anymore is that, again, call it weakness or lack of faith or whatever. I don't have tolerance for that. I can't accept that level of dissonance and still be able to function like I need to function. So that's another, it's kind of like stepping away from a fire that's just too hot. It's like, yeah, I'll just go someplace else where the temperature's better, man.
That is, I mean, I completely understand, the dissonance, and there's definitely the whole Janus thing going on in the church, where there's a public face and then there's a private face, and I mean, we know there's controversy in the church for over 2,000 years. This is nothing new,
Right.
I mean, we're all kind of struggling with our faith and our development, but putting forward this super pious, holy perfection when you're clearly not even close is the hypocrisy of the church.
Yeah, and you mentioned, seeing things behind the scenes, and the more, and I actually saw this more as a layperson, interestingly enough, than I did as a sort of, I was a licensed Baptist minister, even though I never made it full time, and so in my capacity when I worked in that stuff, aside from seeing things that as a young man I was saying, well, they seem awfully giggly with each other, and I wonder what their spouses think about that, and they better be careful, because if temptation might rear its ugly head, and meanwhile they're screwing each other like rabbits, behind the scenes. But I really saw more of that as a layperson, and it's like, I was married 20 years, and it was not always a smooth sailing marriage, but I never went out and screwed somebody else. So I knew, God, as horny as I always am, if I can be faithful for 20 years, even when things aren't so good, why can't any of these other people? And they're all, screwing each other behind the scenes. And I started seeing all that, and I was like, again, even as a layperson, having come back to the church a little bit, as a husband and a father, that sent me packing again, because I was like, I just, it's like, I can get that, watching Cinemax at home. Why am I, why is this constantly happening here? And there are all those arguments, and there's all the talk out there about how, Christians aren't perfect, just forgiven, yada, yada, yada. But at some point, it's like, and this gets into what I think what CONK was saying, and kind of the blue pill nature of the church, and the statist kind of alignment of the church with government in a lot of ways. But there's no the code that is preached there is typically more weakness than strength, and because I think it's been highly feminized in most places, and so. I didn't realize that I was the extent of what I was turned off by and reacting against, until I put a little bit more distance between myself and the church again. But that's kind of what I saw. So, so that's kind of the way that went. And again, it's either lack of faith. You can call it lack of faith or weakness, but and I think there's some truth to that. But at the same time, it's like, I don't have time or interest for, being around all this. Just don't.
I think it's interesting, because when people talk about weakness or things like that, you're showing weakness in that you're not a good slave.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Because all the people that are trying to follow all the purity cues and trying to hold themselves up to such high standards, you're just trying to be the best slave on the plantation, right?
Why am I giving money to these people who are all fucking each other behind the scenes? It's like it's like talking about red pill stuff and talking about Rollo's work. As when I got into reading some of Rollo's work, and I started understanding how what a contextual alpha was, is how Rollo talks about it, which is what I was experiencing when, 17-year-old girls in my youth group were flirting with me. I later on, I got a master's in English, and I was a college teacher of English and writing for a while. And I started experiencing that. So you start understanding what a contextual alpha is, and you start understanding what those dynamics are. And you see the church just putting up with it and covering it up over and over and over again, as though these are all, outlying events, but they're not. That stuff's going on all the time. And it's not, it doesn't necessarily have to be as bad as as what gets portrayed and as happening with the Catholics. But it may be a different kind of sin that's popular, but it's still all over the place, and it's the norm. It's not an exception to the rule. It's part of the rule. And churches fail at that constantly because they want to treat it as, all right, so you sinned, but we're going to forgive you because we don't want the collection plate to start getting lighter, and we don't want the bad publicity, and we don't want other people to be harmed by the truth, so let's just cover it up and everybody be nice and play well together going forward. And
or send them to a different church.
Yeah,
ship them out.
In some denominations it's just so we're gonna move the king here and the queen there and the bishop there and the knight there and the rook over here, and then that's going to make everything all better, right? Because it has nothing to do with the with principles of life that kind of align with the red pill. It has nothing to do with human nature. It's just, this was this unfortunate incident that happened, and we're sure it's not going to happen again. So, there's no chaos here. It's just, we've contained this little, this little problem. So everything will be good, until next month.
Yeah. So
there was a.
Oh, go ahead, Amos.
I was going to say there was in a church I used to go to, and it's a fairly large church here in Minnesota. Basically, the how much can I really say? So the pastor's son was kind of like the rebel in the family.
The PK.
So he got a long time ago kind of got sent away. He went to Singapore. He did some time in the military as a Marine. Then he went to Singapore, kind of had his whole rebellious phase, but then came back as sort of like a prodigal son and became pastor in the church again. And that was kind of his whole the testimony. Everyone, he's the prodigal son pastor, and he's kind of had this new revelation to bring into the church. And then I left that church for completely different reasons. Then years later, heard from people who were still there. Oh yeah, he got caught fooling around with one of the other pastor's wives.
Ooh, spicy.
And I was like, oh, so how'd they handle it? The pastor's wife stepped down. That pastor is still there, and the pastor who was caught fooling around is still there.
Wow.
Take that, women.
Oh no, that pastor. No, he took. They said, he took some time off. I think that was it. He did
a sabbatical. Yeah. For
healing. Yeah. Oh, I guess here comes the rebellion. The rebellion again. Not so perfect pastor now.
I don't know what it is.
This is exactly what they do in the Catholic Church. Is
Orthodox do it too.
Yeah. Oh, so did a no. Well, we'll just.
When I was still active in church in the 80s, and back in the I don't know if this is still a thing. I assume it is, but in the 80s, that whole the Reformed bad boy testimony. Churches were congregations were crack addicts for that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The rocker that found Jesus, and the porn star that found Jesus, and just the dude who was on a tear of drugs and whatever else. And then he had this, beatific vision of something, and, he accepted Christ as his savior, and he turned his whole life around. And that's talk about red meat for the red pill. That was kind of like red meat for the church, because people love that. And, when in the 80s, when Christian youth centers were being built by the bigger churches so that kids would have a place to go that, that wasn't, that was in a more wholesome environment, let's say. That's the kind of stuff that they fed the teenagers. It was because I experienced some of that too. You're just, wow, and you got a guy up there talking about, drugs and, hoes and whatever. And, and so like half of the youth group would be, man, I need to be careful so that doesn't happen to me. But then the other half of the youth group would be like, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, that guy's a badass.
It would backfire. So
I need to go have some sinning done before I have this radical transformation.
Yeah, well, and we're joking about it, and it is funny as heck. But that was kind of what I started thinking as I got out of college. I was like, man, I've repented of all this stuff, but I haven't really done much.
I repented of stealing $10 from my mom's purse.
Right.
This guy over here is doing heroin and tatted up.
Well, and my girlfriend at the time, we were having sex all the time, and we were praying about it afterwards. Please God forgive us for yielding to temptation. Guard our hearts to not let us not let this happen again. And then 2 hours
5 minutes later, yeah.
and it's it's hard to fight biology when you're 17 years old.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's the big crux of the issue is like the church's response to sexuality, especially with young kids. Like it's really just denying biology at the end of the day. Like your sex drive's implanted in you, just like when you get hungry or sleepy or tired, right? So so it's like trying to tell someone, okay, never drink water ever again, and if you do, you have to repent. Like, it's not how that works, right? That's literally in our biology. Yeah, and that existed before the original sin and all that stuff.
And it's a shame, really, because at least in my only real experience is the church in America. But it's a shame that that we've taken such a simplistic and binary view of everything, because if you can learn how to study the Bible and read the Bible as a bunch of things that somebody wrote down and go from there, rather than already having to have an interpretation of what everything is supposed to mean before you read it, it becomes a very different experience. It becomes a very different book, and religion becomes a very different thing, because there is so much just even if somebody wants to discount the the metaphysical or the mystical or the the religious side of the Bible, which a lot of people do, there's so much reality in it if you can learn how to read it without those those modern, we used to call it without church glasses, you got, you've already got this set of preconceived ideas of what everything means before you read it. If you can learn how to read it more naturally, there's just so much there that's valuable that we've totally lost because we've trivialized it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the hot takes a lot of people disagree with me on, but I think youth group does way more harm than good, because they do exactly what you're saying. They bribe kids in with pizza and music and video games, and then they tell them their interpretation of the Bible, and they said, okay, go read it so I'm right. Well, right? They're already front loading what their interpretation before they even read it.
You're absolutely right. And the thing, the sort of the argument I used to get in with my ex, because she was the reason we started going to this church, and I said, yeah, all right, because I don't hate going to church, and I don't really hate the church. It's just there's
nothing there for you, really, kind of thing.
Life's short. It's not my thing. But she was real adamant about getting our boys into the youth group, and I was like, I wasn't going to forbid it. If I had to do it over again, I probably would handle it differently than I did. But I was still a little, I still had a little blue pill thinking going on back then. But even from my day on up to when my boys are in there, I always described it as a pep rally for Jesus, and there wasn't really any substance to it. Yeah, they had Bible studies. Yeah, they had devotionals, but it was the same, silly crap. And And it's exactly like CONK said, they had both of my boys, got into music a little bit. So they were in the youth group band that would play on Sunday nights when the youth group met in the youth center. And so, they'd be playing Christian rock and stuff and, pizza and, have somebody, have some famous athlete come in and talk about how, I spent 10 years, whoring it up real good, but now I found Jesus. And it was the same, it was the same kind of stuff. And my boys were bouncing back and forth between being like, rabidly trying to go out, wanting to go out and evangelize people to, I want to have something that I can repent from. And it was that same kind of bounce, which I think is kind of natural for young men, but I think the church, like you said, it makes it worse, and youth groups tend to make it worse because it's, like I said, it's a pep rally for Jesus, but there's not a lot of substance to it, I don't think.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, could you maybe share a little bit? So after you've come out from all this, obviously you've had your family, you talked about your ex-wife and your kids. Where are you now with your faith, and how do you look back on that whole experience?
It's complicated.
Yeah, that's
always
good.
Is. Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
I'm not sure if this is the best way to describe it. I don't think you can be that serious about anything for a significant amount of time and ever really leave it. Mentally, internally, it's like
it's a part of you, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like I left it, but it didn't leave me, and so there's getting back to talking about old me observing young me and what all that means. I think the core things that kind of drove me there are existential realities and experiences that I think are universal and that we have throughout life. Why am I here? How should I live? All that kind of stuff that never really goes away. And that's really that's a lot of what religion is trying to address. And I think that I think those things are still with me. And I think in terms of Bible stories. I mean, I think in terms of characters, particularly from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
But
that's where all the spicy stuff is, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And when things happen in life, because I was so ingrained in that. I mean, I studied that for 4 years. I had 2 years of Greek. I had 1 year of Hebrew. I had to, for our final exams in those classes, we would just show up and the professor would say, all right, final exam is start with the first verse of Jonah and translate it from Hebrew into English and get as far as you can in 4 hours. And I'm like, yeah, all right. But wow. you do stuff to that degree and to that level of seriousness, it doesn't leave you. I mean, it just doesn't. Mm-hmm. And so, my thinking on religion may have changed. My thinking on the experience I had, my conversion experience and all that, my thinking on that may have changed, but those are experiences that I had that I can't erase. I don't want to erase. But I just don't think you ever fully get away from that. And I think a lot of people end up kind of running from that, which ends up making things even more difficult. For me, it's just been more like, I'm an outsider. I've always tended to be an outsider. I'm just going to do my thing as an outsider. And I'm going to still think about this stuff, and I'm going to still wrestle with it and deal with it because I have to. I don't have any choice. It's almost like it's like the wrestling with God, story, Jacob's ladder, all that. Yeah. It's like, whether you even realize you asked for that to happen or not, or if you did, you're wrestling, do you want to win? Does it matter? what does all that mean? And I don't think that ever leaves you if you've gone down that road and you haven't just tried to deny it or pretend it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Amos, I think you're kind of in a similar boat from what you've talked about before, right? Where you had your whole life invested in this for years, and then out of nowhere, now you're kind of doing nothing with it, right? But it's still kind of stuck in your mind.
It's kind of why we're here.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, 4 years of doing, itinerant ministry and kind of going, oh, I thought I was going to do this a lot longer. Yeah, and then getting red pilled. Well, not even like. This is the weird thing is like Brook and I kind of you kind of know what I'm talking about. Like we called it what we were learning towards the end. That we called that the red pill.
Yeah,
and then we have the actual red pill.
Yeah,
to go
the red pill for everything.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's pills you take for anything you're believing where you question it. But yeah, it's. Now I look back at ministry and the only real use that I got out of it is I can do weddings for friends.
That's pretty cool.
That's about it. And even that is like a tricky thing because it's like I gotta like evaluate it like, okay, with the red pill and marriage, how am I gonna approach this? Yeah. I'm 1 for 2, so on marriages.
Glass half full, Amos. Glass half full.
Yeah. Let's keep it positive. We'll keep it positive.
I'm doing just as good as the world is doing with marriages. Only one of them, one of the 2 weddings I performed, they're still married. So.
Well, that's interesting too because my parents were divorced. I swore I would never be divorced and I would do whatever it took to not be divorced. I ended up divorced anyway,
Yeah.
It's like, you do what you can, man.
I've always said it, whatever, what the thing that we fear has come upon us kind of thing. We work so hard, sometimes not to be like our parents or not to get divorced, but we end up making the exact same mistakes.
Yeah.
So, just live your life, man. Just be you. Don't try to avoid being anything you don't want to be. So definitely.
And it's damn scary when you work so hard at not being something and then you realize that all that hard work at not being something either didn't matter or it just made you even more of the something you were trying to avoid,
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of those stories of like when somebody tells you you're going to die in a plane crash and you try your whole life to avoid planes, but you still die in a plane crash.
Exactly. Exactly.
But it's like a plane hits you instead or something like that.
That's right.
I mean, your story, Nick, is fantastic. It's something that I think we could all resonate with as well. I share Amos's experience, built a church back in my home country of Trinidad and Tobago. I was like the number 3 guy, pastor. You had this other fella. I was like number 3 in that. We went through this whole thing. And even though I've moved away from a lot of what would be considered Orthodox Christianity, I know the stuff. Like I've written over 200 articles. I've done videos. I've done in-depth teachings. I will never be able to run away from all of that stuff. You're looking at me. I'm wearing Odin's, Gungnir. I've got like pagan paraphernalia all over my home, and here I am on Religion Zero, teaching people about the Bible, right? So I fully get that integration. It becomes part of you, really.
Well, yeah, and to me, studying the Bible is an incredible thing to do. I mean, it's like it not only ties you back into where a lot of our history and culture originated and came from, and the thinking and everything, but if you can strip away, the gaudy kind of, midway, hey, come step up and, test your strength at this booth kind of atmosphere that I think the church has tended to adopt. There's a lot of good and serious shit there that, like I said, is reality. And it's like, and it's a shame that people have missed out on the richness of that and and particularly in the Protestant church, I'm going to pick on a little bit because that's what I have the most experience with. You know, everything is logical and rational, and that's the branch that the Protestant church has gone. And Luther's 93 theses or however many it was, and on the Wittenberg door. But there's this element of life that is all mystery, and the Protestant side has failed in that regard. And that's an important part of what I think the journey is, because, one thing I always say is, there are two things we know for sure. We don't know what we don't know, and we're all going to die. And I try to evaluate a lot of things in light of those, heuristics or razors or whatever you want to call them. And there's, when it comes, we don't know that the universe can simply be described by physics.
Correct.
Mostly.
We don't know either way, because we don't know what we don't know. And getting back to like the theme of what we've been talking about, the more I'm not religious, the more I am more religious,
Yes.
Like
big questions matter more.
Right. Those questions matter more. And, there's a big disconnect between, what the church is kind of selling most of the time, whether you're, regardless of whether you're in a more liturgical branch or not. And, all those questions all the questions and all the realities that are just part of human nature. Now I've gone in a different direction because I don't really, I don't really even consider myself a Christian anymore, but in a way that's kind of an absurd description, because all of that is so much ingrained in me that I don't know if that's even a choice I can make. It's almost like choosing not to be a redhead. My hair's been red my whole life. It's gotten a lot darker now, but I was always a redhead. I can use hair dye, but I can't change what my hair color actually is. And I kind of feel that way about religion. It was something that's so ingrained in me that, it's the natural way I approach things, although I certainly don't behave or follow the usual rules that, the church hands out anymore, for sure.
I mean, this is a big part of the reason our friend CONK here put this panel together. It really was an effort in trying to get to the roots of what really matters in, a person's journey of faith, and what is kind of frivolous noise that we can discard. And yeah, we've crossed a lot of different topics on that. And I would very much echo what you're saying. All of the Christianity that I've dealt with and in the studies that I've done, it's a part of me. But at the same time, that hasn't stopped me like exploring other ancient myths and other things. And ironically, I would actually find Christ in these very obscure places. Like, this Ragnarok in the Norse mythology, Thor, thumps the Jörmungandr, and he sacrifices himself to kind of save the world. And it's like, oh my God, this is I could see Christ in this as well. So I don't ever think it was meant, the whole narrative, I don't think it was ever meant to be limited within Christianity.
Yeah.
And I think the creation itself actually speaks to us, and the questions that you have are universal.
Sure.
And yeah, I believe that, you can have those foundations and you can still find it in the far reaches of this world, and you're still grounded in it somehow.
Yeah. Yep. It also kind of reminds me of how, like, one of the new big trendy things the last couple of years is like reading the old Stoic books, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's similar too, because like there's this weird, feeling you get when you realize, oh, I just read a 2,000, 3,000-year-old book. They're talking about the same shit I'm talking about, right? Yeah, human nature like doesn't change that much, no matter how many bells and whistles and smartphones we have, right? Humans are still humans, right? And I get that from like, people reading the Stoics, or, us studying the Bible or other mythologies. They all are talking about pretty similar stuff. Human nature doesn't change that much, right? And so, like Brook was talking about, a lot of this show is cutting through the bullshit of all of the churchianity, is how I call it, all that weird crap we throw on it. Like, And the biggest one, one of the biggest ones of all time is like, oh, you can't have sex till you're like 25 and married, like that's such a new phenomenon relative to human history, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
The thing I like the way I usually describe that is be fruitful and multiply, but not yet.
I don't remember that part.
but that is what we teach people. And I'm not saying that 13-year-olds should go off and have babies and make families, but if and the non-religious people do this too. But if you're going to follow a strict biological imperative, then why isn't it okay for 13-year-olds to procreate and make babies like they did,
a couple hundred years ago?
and I'm not saying they should, but what I'm saying is that raises questions about how we think about things as a society, as a church, as whatever, that people don't like to, that people just, it's like Scarlett O'Hara. I don't want to think about that today. I'll think about that tomorrow, and we approach those kinds of questions that way, which is ass backwards, really. But that's what we do. And you're exactly right. It's that's why we teach, there was a time, that's why we taught history, and that's why we taught, mythology and ancient literature and philosophy and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't simply to, force white man thinking on everybody. It was to teach people how universal all this stuff is and always has been. We just inflect it differently depending on the age that we live in, right? But it's always those are the things that are the big deal. And again, I come back to, it's a shame that we can't talk about it anymore, really, as a society, the way it ought to be talked about. All we can talk about is, whether it's any of the world religions, but particularly Christianity is, are you saved or not? That's all that matters. I guess if you widen the scope enough, that probably is all that matters. But
yeah, it's still denying your material reality right now that you're going through shit, right?
Right. And then it ends up, the direction I ended up going in because of, for whatever reason, is that, I've taken a more, non-theistic view of things, and I've tended to approach things through evolutionary biology, psychology, and anthropology. And I've looked at, there's a sense in which you can look at religion. Religion is a story. So I look at it through that lens and with that kind of a scalpel. So we've always told ourselves and each other, well, not always, but there came a point where we started telling each other stories and telling ourselves stories. Why do we do that? And what has come of that, and how integral is that to our psychology? And my conclusion has been that that's all our brain is a storytelling mechanism for the most part. We can be analytical, but even when we're analytical, we're analyzing things in order to try to put a story together about something, either to answer a question that we have, to justify a thought or behavior that we have, or whatever, or to entertain. And so for me, everything comes back to stories, and that's just how I look at it. And that's been interesting in and of itself, to really go back and consider religion just as a story. And,
in that framework, yes.
Right. And so that, that teaches you something. And, because my academic interest was in religion and philosophy, and also in literature and linguistics, I think that's how I've kind of combined the two, just, for shits and giggles.
Fantastic. And I mean, that kind of leads into what you're doing now. So you've got your podcast going, Let 'Em Burn, and you're also the editor of Punch Riot Magazine. Maybe you want to share a little bit of, were you involved in the founding of the magazine or anything like that? How did that story come about?
Oh yeah, I'm the publisher, I'm the editor, I'm the layout guy, I'm
Delivery
the marketing
boy.
guy, I'm the sales guy, I'm the accountant, I'm everything right now pretty much for that. And yeah, I got on Twitter in 2006, 2007 when it first came out, and didn't really have much use for it. So I stayed off Twitter from probably 2007 until a couple years ago, and I got on Twitter because I wanted to follow some of the red pill guys, because I had younger guys that I worked with and that I was friends with that were going through divorces and doing a lot of things, that having a lot of experiences that I thought a lot of red pill content would help them. And so I was trying to point them in the direction of the usual suspects, as well as absorb as much of that myself, because it was more like, it still comes back to, I didn't want to just send them somewhere. I wanted, they would come to me and talk to me, so I wanted to be able to have a conversation and have it be meaningful. So I got on Twitter for that. And then I started finding all these guys on Twitter, and some girls, but mostly guys, who were writing these great short stories and stuff. And I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed reading it. I look forward to the next time they would put something out. And these are guys like, I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but a guy who calls himself Barry Nishizawa, a guy that calls himself Charlie Winkle, Ernst Groff. There are a lot of guys that I, for whatever reason, stumbled across on my Twitter feed, and I was like, man, this is really good stuff. And then some of them I saw some of them expressing, disappointment that they would try to get their stuff published on some online fiction places that I was not familiar with, but they kept getting rejected because, oh, it's too violent, it's too sexist, the language is too bad, it's too this, it's too that. And I was like, man, fuck that. This is some of the best stuff I've ever read.
Yeah, that's what makes it good.
Right.
You hate fun.
Well, and here's the thing: the common theme, regardless of who wrote it, was that it had a very masculine aesthetic vibe to it, and it was like, and that's why it was being rejected. And having been involved in academia a little bit, having been involved in editing and publishing a little bit, because I worked as a freelance writer and ghostwriter for a while. I was like, yeah, I see what's going on here. It's just the same old, Northeastern literary establishment. It's just that thinking that's permeated, throughout our entire culture. And I was like, well, we're gonna do something about this. And so I got tired of just having to hunt all over the internet and all over Twitter to find their new stuff when it came out. And I was like, I just want all this in one place so I can read it. So that's kind of what the genesis of Punch Riot was. I figured, hey man, if I like this stuff, other people will too. And so it was right about a year ago, this month actually, that I put out the first sample issue, and then April 15th of last year put out volume 1, issue 1, and have been doing it, put out 12 issues last year, and working on issue number 3 for this year. So
fantastic. And what's the response been? Have you been getting a lot of feedback? People really appreciate what you're doing, bringing fame to the writers. What's going on?
It's been it's a very niche market, because people just don't like to read that much anymore. It's because they don't have to. We started out telling each other, well, we did scratch some pictures down, but we started each other really telling each other stories. And I think with the advent of YouTube, and all the stuff we're doing now, it's much easier to do your thing and to tell your story and to produce whatever you're producing, by not writing it down, and by just, there's less time involved, and it's a quicker thing. And I think people just, more people would rather listen to a podcast than read a 300-page novel. So it's not that reading has died altogether, but it's still a harder sell. So the response has actually been good as far as subscriptions go. It took me a while. It took me about 6-8 months to really get enough people contributing that I felt like we had enough material for each issue, which kind of surprised me because I do pay people. I don't pay them much, but I do. That's what the subscriptions are for, is to pay the writers. So I was kind of surprised that more people didn't jump on and start sending things in at first. So that took about 6-8 months, but by September, October last year, maybe November, I was really getting a lot of contributions, and they've really gone up a lot now. So I think there's a pretty good balance right now between the subscriptions, which are still under 100 people, and the amount of contributions I'm getting for each issue. But I've had so many people that are regularly sending in something every month now, and a lot of people have started. Like Vince from Masculine Geek, he's got this serialized story called Laser Dicks, which is a play on Dick as a play on a detective. So there's this group of detectives. They're kind of back in the 20s, but they have all these futuristic technology and weapons and stuff. So the anachronism is kind of cool there. And so he's got, he gives me a chapter every month that we publish in there. And that's really gotten to be a thing. We've got a lot of serialized pieces that people are throwing in there every month. And yeah, so the response has been pretty good. I put it together so that it's a good 30-minute to 45-minute read, every month. And I figure for people who like to read, it's different stuff. It's highly, it's very violent. It's very, there's a lot of violence, gratuitous sex, whatever, depending on who's doing the writing, but it's all really good writing. And so I just wanted to put together something that I could sit down, with a drink and a cigar or whatever, and have just 30 or 45 minutes to read something fresh and original that was entertaining and interesting, and not the same old crap that is just, that is just mass produced out there. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. So it's growing slowly, but it's growing.
Fantastic. Well, we've opened it up to the chat. We have a couple of viewers and listeners. And I guess if we get through with that, if we got more questions, we'll wrap it up after that. We've got Heather. Heather's joining us. Let's see. Add stream. Good morning, Heather. How are you doing?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, coming through loud and clear.
Great. I believe I saw Nick do a show with Ryan Stone last year. I believe, maybe I'm mistaken.
I did.
Okay. And that's the first time I heard about your work and everything. And, really following like men's interests and writing and stuff like isn't really my thing, but I enjoyed listening to the different interviews and stuff like that. It really got me through my move listening to all those different interviews and different points of view. It was like, okay, well, this is something. But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience because, when you said about, the different pastors having affairs and stuff, I know some of the panel have said things about that in their past, but you're from, I believe from my generation being an 80s teen and everything where you had that going on. And I really felt isolated with that stuff happening in my church and stuff. It was very embarrassing and very confusing and, difficult to understand. And so it's one of those, it's good to know I'm not alone kind of things. So yeah. I just wanted to say I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and everything. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, appreciate that. And it's not only the professionals who are screwing each other. It's the lay people too. Yeah, maybe that's why we call them lay people, right? But that's to me that's the that's the thing that nobody ever really wants to address, is that in some cases, I think divorce and promiscuity, supposedly through surveys, is sometimes even higher in evangelical circles than it is in the general population. And people, and you guys all know this because you've all been in those Bible studies and those other, kinds of groups where people are sharing really intimate stories about themselves, and there's so many emotions flopping around that, people end up, climbing on each other afterwards. I mean, it's just crazy the way that happens, right?
Yeah, it's funny because to me, they're kind of shooting themselves in their own dick, right? Because they're setting up these arbitrary, huge rules and then failing them, the rules they made up for themselves. So,
or it's people crapping out on their own commitments to their spouses as well, and their families. Why is that okay?
Yeah.
And then they start kind of paint it with a lot of fake humility to just, well, I am weak, but he is strong. And then they just kind of like ride out that failure. As
I've heard everything. I've heard everything from, my husband just wasn't as good of a Christian as this guy. So I decided to, he was my soulmate. So I started screwing him. And I'm like, well,
for the Lord.
The Lord called you to cheat.
Do all things through the glory of God.
Talk about moving in mysterious ways. That's taking it a little bit too far.
All right, we got our friend Tom here. Tom, how are you doing, man? Are you on your honeymoon now?
No, she's back in Jacksonville. I'm just north of Nashville in Clarksville.
Right.
Yep.
You're all over the place, bro.
I am all over the place. I'm going to stop in Kansas City for IHOP. I'm going to see IHOP Kansas City. I'm very excited for that.
No, good luck. Yeah, it's a special place, but
yes.
Hey, maybe we'll grab some food or something. Yeah.
I would love that, sir. I'm buying. I got you. Wherever you want. We could go to a Brazilian steakhouse if you want.
No, the ones here's not good. We'll get some good old Kansas City food. Like I forced Amos to. I'll force you to eat Kansas City food.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Most people don't come here on purpose, so you got to get it while you can.
I got you, bro. We're going to have a good time. Nick, I just want to say thank you, sir. I saw we follow each other on Twitter. It's great to connect a name to a face, and I just subscribed to your YouTube. And, sir, I resonate with so much of what you're saying. Thank you so much for sharing. It's a real blessing. You're a man of God. Thank you so much.
Good to meet you, man.
Awesome, Tom. Awesome. Stay safe, our friend, and we look forward to seeing you next week as well.
All right, drop a Venmo link, guys. Drop a Cash App. I'm gonna donate.
Yes, that's on CONK. He'll sort that out.
yeah, wherever CONK is.
Love you,
Screw that guy. Yeah.
Take care, Tom.
Love you guys. Bye.
Peace.
I've been called a lot of things, never a man of God. I like that guy.
I used to be called that. They don't call me that anymore. Oh, fantastic. Nick, I mean, you got a fantastic story. I mean, just kind of what are you doing now? Any projects in the future that you're hoping to launch? Are you doing a meetup with the Punch Riot crew? Anything like that?
Well, I'm really doing too much right now. I'm actually, I'm kind of semi-retired at this point. I do, my main gig is really technology consulting. That's what I've been doing. I've been in software engineering for the last 15, 20 years. And so I'm still doing some technology work.
That's a good gig.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I always tell people that, getting into that in the late 90s was, one of the few good decisions I ever made. So
yeah,
certainly paid better than teaching English and, all that other crap. But yeah, so I'm doing that. I'm still doing, I'm trying to keep Punch Riot going, and we actually started a new thing with Punch Riot called Punch Riot Theater. We released the first episode or the first broadcast right after Christmas last year, and that can be found on the Punch Riot YouTube channel. And basically what it is it's about a 30-minute presentation that's kind of like an old time radio play. So we're writing original scripts for that, getting voice actors to do all the voices, and then putting it out. So episode 1 is free and available to everyone on the YouTube channel. It's called The Biggest Dicks in the Case of the Missing Vaginas, and I wrote that one, and I tried to make it as offensive as possible while still being kind of elegantly offensive, I guess.
This hasn't been taken down by YouTube yet, and your channel hasn't been banned.
Well, I mean, it's not monetized. They won't let me monetize it because I've got some copyrighted material in there for the theme music, and
right.
I'm still going back and forth with YouTube and the copyright owner about, I paid for the use of that music. It's not like I stole it, and yet they still won't let me monetize. So who knows? I mean, Punch Riot got banned from Facebook before we ever actually launched our page there for whatever reason, and they wouldn't tell us why, and they wouldn't let me appeal it. So I think I know why, but
I think we all know why.
So I'm doing that and trying to get Punch Riot Theater going, and getting some more original scripts out there and get the performances done. And that's mainly it as far as what I'm doing on the YouTubes and the Twitters. I write some too. So I've got a novel that was supposed to be finished last fall, but spending all this time on Punch Riot and having to edit and work with writers and do all that has really sapped all my spare time. So I'm struggling to try to get back to that as well.
I get that. I think I've added the Punch Riot YouTube channel to the description below, guys, if anybody wants to go and check it out. Of course, I think I've added Nick and all of his Twitter information. You guys could connect with him. Guys, we're almost on time. We got about 4 more minutes. Any last questions or any kind of final thoughts? CONK, what are you thinking, man?
Oh, I'm always thinking. Never anything good, though. Yeah, I know before you're talking about like having existential crises, right? And I usually think those are good things, in the long term. I used to say if you don't have an existential crisis every month, you're not thinking hard enough. And I mean, this whole idea and the concept, that goes around the red pill and these spheres that we talk about, like, is the concept of like unplugging, having, those new revelations of realizing like what narratives are bullshit in your life, things like that. What's your most recent one, do you think, is that you've been having?
My most recent realization or existential crisis?
They're usually one and the same, just one after the other. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to preface it, I do agree with you. I think those are just signs of growth and change, really. And I think they tend to be good things. I don't, it's one thing to have the crisis, but it's another with the way we respond to it. And sometimes we don't respond to it in that great of a manner. But I think probably my most serious existential crisis right now is the fact that I don't have existential crises anymore.
Good on you, man.
When you get older and I'm 50, I recently turned 54, and you start looking at that grave stops becoming a symbol and starts becoming an actual destination. It kind of, it makes you prioritize and kind of reevaluate things. And I went through a time shortly before my divorce, after my dad had just died, and I was angry about a lot of stuff still, mainly things that were going on with my marriage, and I knew it was done for. It just, we're kind of between, the hospital and the morgue at that point. And I was really angry about a lot of shit, and I kind of had this, and I hate to say this because this sounds too religious, but I had this voice in my head, right, that was just said, what the fuck are you complaining about? You've pretty much gotten to do whatever you wanted to in your life. How many people throughout history, much less the world today, can say that? I mean, you've done some dumbass fucked up shit, but you got to choose. You didn't grow up in a hole, in a jungle somewhere. You went to college and did what you wanted to there, and you did a lot of different things. You married the person that you wanted to marry. That didn't work out. There's all this stuff, but you're such a fucking whiner for just finding all this stuff that to be angry about. And it was and the image I had was at the end of the book of Jonah, if anybody doesn't know the story, Jonah ends up sitting out in the desert trying to get shade under a single leaf or something, but it just ends with him being angry. And that's how it ends. And I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to end just being, an angry guy sitting in a desert by himself. And once I kind of had that realization, it was like everything kind of, it was like, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff, even though that's kind of a trite cliche. It was just like, what the hell do I have to worry about? And that was really kind of the beginning of where my, talk about journeys. That's where kind of my, red pill mindset started coming from, in earnest, because it was like, you've done what you wanted to. Don't be such a pussy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because so you might know this, Nick, maybe not, but I'm an addiction counselor as my 9 to 5. And a big part of my job is teaching small groups to like felons in the drug court system. And that's actually what you're saying is very similar to the theme we've been going off of, which is like when people are on their deathbed, what do they talk about? What do they actually regret? They don't say, man, I should have worked more. I wish I bought a nicer car. They talk about, man, I should have paid more attention to these people. Man, I should have had more, relationships invested, instead of talking about, oh, I wish I had more money. I wish I had more drugs. I wish I had more blah, blah, blah. Right. And so I think it's really interesting that you're talking about that, death is eventually going to happen. Right. It's no longer just like some plot of a movie, right? That's a real life thing, that you have to come to grips with. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about. So I thought that was interesting. Like what actually do people regret on their deathbed, and how can we learn about that now and use that to our own advantage now, caring about what really matters.
And it's interesting you bring that up, because, having to tie this back into the purpose of our being here, Christianity, I mean, religion is if we just talk about it in Christian terms, Christianity is about relationships, right? It's about covenants, and honor,
and death.
Yeah. and at the end of the day, that's really all there is. And whether you want to go, whether you want to look at it in terms of man and God or man and man, everything really comes back to, it's all human relationships and how you manage those and how you participate in those. And there's, a car, a house, a yacht, that doesn't really satisfy you the way having right relationships with people and being in good standing with the people that you need to be in good standing with. That's really what it's all about. And, that's why I think that's why the church fails so much, is because it fails at emphasizing that, in favor of, theology and our particular, brand of, X. So,
yeah, they care way more about the rules than the people that are involved in those rules. Right. Also the government also.
And, the rules end up becoming a lot of the rules are kind of made up.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're cultural norms and stuff like that. Yeah.
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 I mean, one of the cruxes of Jesus, pun intended, was that he fulfilled the law, right? But boy, do humans love their law.
Well, he and that's the thing that most people have a problem with. He fulfilled the law wrong.
That's what they think. Yeah.
He didn't fulfill it the way he was supposed to, right?
Yeah. Yeah, can I at least keep these couple laws to berate people with? You know, come on. Yeah.
Amos, what's going on with you, man? Any final thoughts, comments, questions? You're getting a tan out there in Minnesota, bro.
Yeah, no, it's just the freaking glare of
Yeah.
yeah.
At least it's not glare off the snow.
The sun will come out right now.
Yeah. No, not too much to really not too many thoughts. I know I don't know if I've told CONK and you, Brook. So I did actually submit something to Nick for Punch Riot, but I got to work on it more before he puts it out there. So
I gave him notes. Yeah, but I think it's going to be good once we get it to where we need it to be. And I also told him that I would like more stuff dealing with religion in there, whether it's satire, whether it's criticism, whether it's, you know, some kind of relevant, meaningful explication that's not full of shit. You know, I would like, you know, I'm definitely open to having more of that kind of stuff in there. So I'm really excited to have Amos, you know, working on that with us.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I'd love to do that, but I'm much more of a talker than a writer. I would rather. I purposefully didn't turn in most of my papers in college, and I asked if I could just do like a 20-minute speech instead of a paper, and it didn't work that often. But I tried.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Amos, if you just add in some more sex and violence, I'm sure it'll all work out, you know, just fine.
yeah, I gotta get some of the characters to start screwing each other or something.
Yeah.
Or it needs the word dick more often in the title and the chapters.
If you could start off with two full-time ministers screwing each other and cheating on their husbands, and then or wives or whatever, and then
or both.
Have those spouses come in and shoot them in the head while they're, you know, in the act. I think that would be a great start.
Yeah, that happened in Kansas City. Yeah, that actually happened here. So,
while they have to be in some part of the church while they're doing it too.
Oh boy, get that confessional going.
Yeah, the confession booth, man. That's a glory hole waiting to happen.
Well, you know, I always joke with people.
Baptismal hop up. Yeah,
I try to publish the most offensive stuff I can because I want to become controversial so I can get the free marketing off of it. But I haven't even been successful at that yet. So,
well, gentlemen, we are coming up on time here. Nick, you've been an absolutely phenomenal guest. I absolutely love the story. You know, I look forward to seeing more of your work, and I'm going to start looking into your publications and seeing what you're putting out there. Just quickly, how can people get in touch with you if they want to know more? What's the easiest way to access you?
Twitter,
the
Nick August, or punchriot.com, like it says right there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an email address on Punch Riot, and you can always ping me on Twitter.
Yeah, I believe I have all of your links below, including your YouTube channel, the Punch Riot YouTube channel, as well as all the Twitter stuff. So,
thanks,
yeah, absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up for Religion 043. Next week we are Amos. We on Amos' channel?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So Amos is in the hot seat next week. So yeah, everybody have a fantastic week, and we look forward to seeing everybody next week, Sunday. Take care, everyone.